What is up, everybody? Let me know if you can hear me. If you're out there, let me know. Tonight, I wanted to get on here. There were a couple of things spinning around in my head uh, that came from a conversation I had last night with my friend Matthew Parlato, and it also came from a video, Paul Vanderklay's, that I was watching, and it also came from John Vervaeke. And these things all have to do with the end of the world. Uh, in fancy Christian words, let me know if you can hear me. Somebody at least let me know on the comments that it's coming through okay. I know there's a few people out there watching. Maybe even my wife will let me know if she can hear me. She could text me. Let me know if the video is coming through okay. And the audio. Check one. Okay. So, yeah, there were a couple of things. I was watching Paul Vanderklay's conversation with Chris Green. He's a Anglican bishop in, I think, kind of a smallish Anglican branch of the Anglican Church. John Vervaeke's general history with his Christian lineage and perspective, and then a conversation I was having with my friend Matthew Parlato last night. Yeah, there's people here, so I'm assuming that you can hear me, but if anyone wants to share in the comments that this is working, please do so. I've got my fancy little travel mic with me here in the studio, the travel studio. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of go over was, so I was talking with my friend Matthew, and he is a self-proclaimed. He says he is self-conscious about his biblical lack of biblical literacy, and he sometimes asks me questions that just about the Bible, and one was about the end times, hence the name. It's the end of the world of the stream. And if I'm being really honest, the end times is something that I have avoided since I was a kid for most of my life, as a topic of discussion and as a topic of interest, primarily because it scared the hell out of me uh, in the Christian tradition. And, you know, there are certain reasons for why that is, and there's certain reasons why, in some ways, it doesn't have to. And I wanted to kind of go over a few thoughts I had before I get into the meat of it, which just from my experience, one being sometimes, the way I was raised, my father had a pretty super, what I call like a radical Christian conversion. And part of that in the 80s for him was he went to a small Bible school, and he did that trying to respond to what he felt like was a call to do ministry in his life. And I think that in this school it was dispensational, and that it put a lot of focus on end times teaching. I think it was charismatic. And so as I grew, as we got a little older, because I was very young at that point, as it was a topic of interest for my dad, it became a topic of interest for our family. And sometimes I was thinking about core beliefs. I was hearing, and I don't remember who was talking about this, but your core beliefs that are developed as a child. I think this is, this is me just talking completely off the top of my head, but that those core beliefs, when they get questioned at different times in your life, can be very difficult. And so, we're not. Do you just raise your kid with no core beliefs so that they can be defined when they're an adult, or do you try to instill into them things that are very meaningful to you? And I think that that's an important question to ask, and that's what my dad was doing. Um, but in that, there were nights where we would talk about the end of the world and worries and anxieties he may have been having about that. And for me, that meant talks about the Antichrist, talks about the mark of the beast, and talks about rapture. And, so that was my context for that. And if I was being honest, there were things in there that I didn't really find that exciting. I found them terrifying. And thank you, Marcus. Um, and so, yeah, it was something, even as I became, like, I took on a Christian faith of my own as a young man, that was part of it that I didn't really want to mess with because, um, yeah, like, I didn't know what to do with it. I know that what I was taught as a kid kind of terrified me. But when I was encountering other teachings about God, they didn't terrify me. So, I didn't really put those things together very well. However, I went to college, and I did do biblical studies. And I also, if your church at some point goes and you're active in going to church, you may go through the book of Revelation a time or two while you're growing up. So, first thing I wanted to do actually was, what's up, Nathan? Was go over the general points of view on the end times. And the way I did that actually was just the good old chat GBT. I said briefly to describe the main three theological positions of eschatology. So there are three main, and then there's this fourth caveat. The three main ones are called premillennialism, amillennialism, and postmillennialism. So obviously, it was destined that the millennials were going to have to deal with this. But I know, I'm hilarious. Um, so I'll read through these. Premillennialism: the position holds that Jesus Christ will return before a literal 1,000-year reign. So literal millennium on Earth. Premillennials believe in a future period of tribulation followed by Christ's second coming, after which he'll establish a physical kingdom on Earth for 1,000 years. So right there you have the word literal. We keep that in mind. Point number 2, amillennialism, or like the word atheist, like no theism, no God. This would be like no millennial, because that is to interpret the millennium as a symbolic number or symbolic amount of time rather than a literal 1,000-year period. They believe the millennium represents the current church age, a spiritual reign of Christ in our hearts of believers. In this view, Christ's second coming will occur at the end of this period, culminating in the final judgment and the establishment of the new heaven and new earth. And then the third main position is called post-millennial. So premillennial, amillennial, post-millennial. This view posits that Christ's return will be after this millennium. The millennial is a future period during which Christian ethics and the gospel will be progressively prevail, leading to a time of further and further peace and goodness and righteousness. This golden age will precede Christ's coming, after which will follow the final judgment and consummation of God's kingdom. So those are the three: premillennial, amillennial, and postmillennial. So this idea that in Scripture it talks about 1,000-year reign, when that happens, what will happen before. So the next question that I asked, and let me see if we've had. I love this. For those of y'all who don't know, this is a little Easter egg. This is my wife, Megan. I'm here for a minute, and I hear you. I'm only clicking on the video because it said it's the end of the world. So she's letting my clickbait do its job, helping the algo. Thank you, Megan. So yeah. So the next question I asked ChatGPT was the eschatological views traditionally held by different denominations. Oh, I said, which traditionally held by Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, evangelicals, and charismatics. The Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church traditionally hold to the amillennial, the not literal millennium, the symbolic millennium. And for those of y'all in this little corner of the internet, that should make sense to you. Protestantism views on eschatology are diverse. It includes all three. It says while mainline Protestant denominations such as Lutherans and Reformed churches often lean towards amillennialism, so the ones that are kind of more historically close to the older parts of Christianity still hold that view. However, not all do. Evangelicals, particularly those influenced by, and this is important, dispensational theology, traditionally hold a premillennial view, especially specifically dispensational premillennialism. This belief includes the rapture, specifically a literal 7-year tribulation, subsequent 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. However, not all evangelicals are dispensationalists. Some may hold to historic premillennialism. And it says charismatics also hold to a premillennialism in the Pentecostal traditions. So then I said, how does dispensational fit into these categories? It says dispensationalism is a specific theological framework within premillennialism. To go back, premillennialism is where Christ will return, that there's a 1,000-year reign, a literal 1,000-year reign, and believe in a future period of tribulation followed by Christ's second coming. So there's 1,000-year reign, then there's tribulation, then Christ comes. So dispensationalists fit into this, and dispensationalism is a theology that's only about as old as the United States. So its literal interpretation that's a key feature. They interpret the prophetic passages, particularly those by Daniel and Revelation, as literal future events. They believe in these distinct periods, thus the word dispensations. Like these, there's like, I think in Revelation there talks about different dispensations that divide history to distinct periods, the church age, the current age. They believe in the rapture, so that is distinct to dispensationalism, but very, very popular in kind of American evangelicalism. Can tell how influential this was. We can talk about that, this idea, even in the last, since the 80s, really. There's a book by a guy named Hal Lindsey, The Late Great Planet Earth. And in the 90s, there was the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye and I can't remember the other guy. So let's see. And dispensational maintains a clear distinction between Israel and the church, believes that God's promises to Israel will be literally fulfilled in the future millennial kingdom. So those are very small bullet points that they have much larger ideas that surround them. I want to go in now to why these, or why I was thinking about this. So I mentioned earlier there was a conversation Paul had with Chris Green, not Keith Green. And there's a big conversation that I heard John Vervaeke unpack kind of his trauma related to Christianity. Let's see, my wife's texting me and she said I read this wrong. She says, "I'm here for a minute and I hear you, but I'm only clicking on a video entitled 'It's the End of the World' for you." I don't know how I misread it earlier, but happy wife, happy life. There is truth there. And it is the end of the world as we know it. Pseudobotheus. Let's see. Yes, and you're going to catch, it would be a little difficult having this convo with Keith Green. Yeah, there's some deep evangelical Freudian slip there with me. So, yeah, I'm going to do a little clip here. I'm going to try to do clips, and we'll see how this how these work real quick. And Hold on. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Showing screen. Here we are. Gonna play some audio. Can't hear the audio. Okay. Well, let's see here. Can't hear the audio. Deafened. What does that mean? Deafened. I need to know what deafened means. And can't hear the audio. Because deafened makes me think it was loud. So let me see if I can fix my audio here. Oh, audio. I don't know what. I'm going to change. All right, I'm trying to find out why my audio is not working. I can hear the audio, but you guys can't hear the audio. You can do it. Thank you, Sudo. Um, I tried it again. Hmm, mic. Let's do deep. I'm gonna try this. Change my mic. Let me know if you can hear this now. Can you hear this? Hmm. Oh man, so this isn't something I've done with the audio on a live stream. Trying to get this to work, which is unfortunate. Um, let's see. Audio. I need some branding. Branding. Well, can you tell me if you can hear this music? Y'all hear that music? Can y'all hear that background music? Okay, so that's on there. So, StreamYard is sharing window. Edit name. I'm still working on it, guys, but I'm struggling here. I guess I can own. I'm just gonna have to uh, speaker. I'm gonna have to work this one out later. I don't want to keep things slow things down too much. So Pseudo Boethius is very. Uh, that was like music from inside of StreamYard, but I'm guessing I don't know how to get the music from um, or the audio from these links to work. I'm gonna have to again get lashed by Grim Grizz if he ends up watching this uh, on my showmanship. So, But I'll go ahead and I guess I'll talk about these clips. This one is Chris Green, and he talks about he coming from Pentecostalism, like a very intense form of Pentecostalism, into he's now considers himself a charismatic Anglican. But he said he talked about this meeting, like a revival meeting on a Saturday night. And during this meeting, I guess he's probably between 7 and 10. He said he's curled up underneath a pew as people are just doing wild things in the sanctuary, running, loud preaching. They're saying he's coming tonight. He's coming tonight. And he paints this really intense picture by him being curled up underneath a pew, scared about everything that's going on. And I think about him, I think about me actually having nights going to bed just completely scared that if our family doesn't take the mark of the beast, that we are gonna have to be hunted down by police with dogs, and if they find us, we might be beheaded. That's part of dispensationalism, like intensely. And I just don't know how you, looking back, with Chris's story and then my story, and then I also want to point over to John's story here. If y'all can see this, I can't play the audio, but this is from his Tim Ferriss podcast that he did. Tim Ferriss, if you don't know, let's see if I can find well, he's talking in most of it. Tim Ferriss, very popular, 1.49 million subscribers. There's a spot. He looks like this. And he's like one of those productivity guys um, that talks about how to master things. Like he like tried to learn how to play drums and play with Journey in like 7 days or something. Like he takes on a challenge, and he's written books about it. And so John Vervaeke, who, if you're in this little corner of the internet, you have heard him talk a lot, but that's a big part. This whole thing, the end of the world, is a big part of him and his rejection of the Christian faith. He had a similar experience to Chris Green and to myself, where he said he had an experience because he was taught about the rapture as a young child. That when he came home one day, he couldn't find anybody, and he expected everyone to be home. And in that moment, he believed that he had been, quote unquote, left behind by God and by everybody else. And what did that mean? That means that he was not good enough. Or, I mean, that's the simple psychology of it. You can paint whatever theological terms you want to, but for children, that story. And again, like I outlined all these things, and then I got to dispensationalism, which is like about 200 years old. And if you want to, you can go and chat GBT the hell out of this stuff and really get a much deeper understanding. But as I kind of referenced in the part earlier, the dispensationalism has very literal interpretation, distinct periods of these dispensations. The rapture is a big part of it. And those dispensations are like 7-year periods and all this crazy, wild stuff. And the interesting thing, so I mentioned this book series in the 90s called the Left Behind series, and it was a fictional series about what might happen. And I actually read a lot of it, and a lot of that reading of it, because there was like 12 books, and they just kept churning them out, and they sold so many. And I think that's why evangelicalism, like, I mean, this is the predominant, probably even within mainstream historical churches, that if they were buying Christian books in the 90s, like your parents, and were reading that, they're heavily influenced by dispensationalism. And so that anyways, that well, that type of theology is a powerful story. And there was another book in the 80s I mentioned earlier by a guy named Hal Lindsey, The Late Great Planet Earth. And it's this, very literal, trying to put, it was a very modern way of looking at the scripture and saying this has to work here. This has, because I'm taking everything at face value. Um, so, that's the end of the world. And then, so the story continues to go for me. When I went full time at a church, I hadn't really, I now was working more directly with a pastor, and we hired an associate pastor, and both of them loved theology. They loved, I was, this may be part of the reason why I'm not like the biggest theological person, but so I sat down, I was like, okay, I knew the vague outlines of each of these, but like, talk me through them. And my pastor at that time, he was like, well, I'm an amillennial. And I was like, well, what is the, I'd heard that growing up, without any like pro or con, but, so he kind of outlined it for me. I was like, okay, so I can just like, let go. This is the historical position, yet it's not culturally, at least, especially in the South, it's not culturally like the predominant story that you hear about the Christian end. And so, hey guys, there's people happening over here in the comments. Probably just tween anxiety amplified whatever was going on at the time. So we'll highlight some. Harold Camping's prediction in 2011. And then, yeah, Boethius, he said he didn't know that he was on Tim Ferriss. Yeah, it was a really good interview. He really outlines that story. There's like even just like a straight clip of that part of his leaving Christianity. What's up, Mills and Afriel? So that's and Orthodox Boomer Grandma. That's kind of where I found myself, and I was like, there's this other story, the amillennial story, that is more vague. It doesn't try to answer all the questions, and it's interesting because there's like one verse I think in maybe Second Thessalonians that talks about is where the whole theology of the rapture comes from, I think. And I'm again. My dad even had a T-shirt of like two tennis shoes that were sitting there, like two Converse tennis shoes, and there was like this whoosh of like air movement, and it's like, and you'll be caught up in this in a blink of an eye, and it's like had the scripture, and he wore that shirt out in the early 90s, and so that's how important that was around the house. So, yeah, and man, what was I listening to today? It wasn't even that long ago. Someone was talking. It was old Ruslan, and he was talking Ruslan KD, and he was talking about. It was interesting. He mentioned like Christian nihilism or like the hyper productivity, like Christian he was kind of archetyping health and wealth versus like a Christian nihilism, like it's all gonna burn. We're just waiting for the Lord, and like this other kind of health and wealth, like just the Lord's gonna bless me and I'm gonna start this business. So he kind of was mentioning that the nihilism that can come with just waiting for the world to end. It's like, why should I look around? Look how terrible it is. Why should I even care? Why should I worry about being financially responsible? Why should I worry about my children's future? Why should, because you can just tell, because the Bible says it so clearly. And if you look at this, then you can see that this is the end. And, it kind of can set you into that mindset. And there's a lot of ties between that kind of, you get into also like, I have the secret knowledge. I'm going to be able to predict when God's coming back. And there's like a power that comes from that, thinking that kind of secret knowledge stuff. And I would contend that psychologically, what that does, I mean, it kind of can impede you from, um, really, uh, let's see. Mill says, "Oh boy, I've seen people alternate between nihilism and prosperity stuff based on their eschatological positions." Interesting. And there it is. It's First Thessalonians. I think I said Second Thessalonians. The only real rapture passage in the New Testament. So, you know, and it's easy because like when I was talking to Matthew, he was watching a guy talk really interesting history, like biblical history and stuff, and he was like, "Tell me about this guy." And he said he's a dispensationalist. What's that mean? And I do think that there's a lot of interesting, I'm sure, actually some decent scholarship, because there's whole seminaries that are, um, like kind of would call themselves like, um, uh, yes, and that that's a part of their identity. But they also, so I would just really I would attach dispensationalism to a very modern take on scripture, and it fits into a paradigm of the way you would trying to fit the science like into the bounds in a very literal way of the Bible. It's kind of, sets it that way. It's in that camp, um, and if this thing, if a lot of people end up watching this, there's a lot of people that have a lot of, well, you know, we all want to stake our positions on being correct or right, these things, but it just was on my mind because of that. And I wish that I was better prepared. I'm not on my home setup here, so the trying to get these clips, I tried to do better. Grim has been, giving constructive feedback to Pete and I on our, Truly Strange episodes, and uh, he was like, "You need clips," and so I tried to get some clips here, but I didn't have it set up to play the audio, so I will have to figure that out. Um, but yeah, I did, this Chris Green recent conversation with Paul Vanderklay, and, I'll throw these back up here just so people can get a view here. This is the Chris Green one. Um, the deep hidden durable Christian code embedded, often unknown by those who practice it. And that is the thing. I mean, we're talking about one of the codes. This is John Vervaeke on Leaving Christianity, the Tim Ferriss show. And then I kind of wanted to head this way. This one doesn't have like a. I took this picture at Symbolic World, and that's, Martin Shaw on the left, and then, Jonathan Peugeot, Jordan Peterson, and Richard Rowland. And then on the stage is Dirt Poor Robbins, with Neil deGrasse. And that's right before I introduced myself to the Jordan Peterson. And I just like was sitting there, and not John, um, yeah, Jonathan Peugeot, he, like, this thing got 30,000 views because Jonathan Peugeot retweeted it. He's like, "This is my idea of the eschaton." And when he said that, I was like, wait, like, we're at a rock concert. This is fun. This is beautiful. This is, and he's like there with, his friends, his really, deep, insightful, creative partners in that he's finding in this network of meaning. And, and he said, when he reposted that picture, he said, this is like my idea. This is getting close to my idea of the eschaton, which the word eschaton is like end. I don't know the transliteration in it, but the end of things. And when he said that, I was kind of just like, um, what an optimistic, view on the end of things, on the end of the world. And I have taken some of his language um, about the end when it comes to, he's like, a world is ending, not like, or like, not the world. He says a world is ending. And these ages it reminds me, of course, this should be par for the course, is from the Lord of the Rings, in that they're in like the third age. What was the say? How did those ages begin and end? And then it's the end of the Lord of the Rings saga is they enter into a new age, the age past Sauron, the evil ring destroyed. The elves, head off to the island, and the hobbits go into living their good lives, their good, happy lives. Never, and just their world disappears from the thoughts of man. So, um, but yeah, that's just what was on my mind tonight, was the end of the world. And we're in the election year. um it's always ramped up. Like, that was one of the things I feel like I went crazy during the last election cycle, being online, and just all the wildness that was going on in 2020. um and I do feel more optimistic, not because things are maybe better, but because there's just more hopeful. And I think that growing up, that didn't sound like a hopeful end of the world. Um, and the way that good old ChatGPT, uh, yeah, Aaron, uh, yeah, yeah, that's here we are. What about a new shadow? Who knows what the symbolism there is? But I genuinely think something crazy happened when I saw the title of your stream. Clickbait. um, yeah, so this optimistic, like, hopeful idea. Um, I've had a shattering of my world, and a new world was born from that. It was better. Um, so yeah, there's this may probably, if you're looking for ideas, bad, like, that's not what I'm on the internet to do. Is I'm not on the internet to um, oh, the new Shadows manuscript for the sequel. Well, that's interesting. Well, that would maybe they enter. You could paint that in all different directions. Um, but yeah, that, like, that Jonathan's sitting there with his friends. Like, even that looks like Frodo, Sam, and Merry and Pippin right there, doesn't it? uh, who's carrying the ring, huh? Right there. Um, yeah, like a hopeful eschatology. I had a conversation with James Cortides where we talked about, I can't remember, an optimistic eschatology. There was a book he was reading at the time, and that was part of our discussion, one of my earlier podcasts, and that was what was fascinating to me, was this idea to be hopeful. And I think that, as I was talking about, that's what I want this to be like and be about. That's what I'm on the internet to be, is curious, um, and encouraging. Um, and yeah, let's see what Mill said here. Do you make a connection between eschatology and being born again, metanoia? I kind of drew one earlier. Uh, one of the things, Abraham's story is a big story to me in my life, and when you look at his life, you kind of there's different moments of, it's like this pattern, and so there were several times when he was born again, like when he set out on that adventure with Sarah to Canaan. That was like a world ending and a new world beginning. And then there was struggle, and then then you have that moment where that God makes a covenant with Abraham, and that was a kairotic moment, and a new covenant is made, a new world. And then he's given the promise from the very beginning, and then towards the end, one of the last great stories of his life is this radical situation with Isaac. And again, like these kairos moments where we're called to deepen our trust in God every time. Um, that's me trying to answer your question, Michael Mills. Is that your first name, Michael Mills? Um, and I think there was repentance. All of life is repentance. There are moments of repentance. Repentance is an act of trust. To believe that there's a better way than the way that you were going. Um, yeah, I am going to open this up here. I know it's late, but there's people out there hanging out on this weeknight, and I've got a little bit of time. If you want to come in, let's see. No. No. No, it's Chance, and thank you. If I star this comment, does it put it up in the top? Starred. I don't know how to do the fancy trick of making it stay up at the top. But if you want to come hang out for a bit, come hang out. It's the end of the world. On the YouTube line, it said, and I feel fine because I'm so creative. Trying to think. I've been a travel nurse for 2.5 years, and so I spent a lot of time in a hotel room. And starting this YouTube journey about 6 months ago, I've done a few of these streams at night, and it's whenever um, whenever I get a hankering, these are fun to be able to do because I'm not with other people here. I'm not bothering anybody at my house, and there's something to the connective nature of it versus just consuming for myself. So, but it's also hard for people to just jump on at this time of night um, because y'all are all sitting in bed or wrapping up the day and probably like conversationed out. But I'll do some grifting here. I have channel memberships and I have some podcasts. I'm still got podcasts being booked. I've got podcasts coming out, and I release them early, like a week early. Mills has got sleeping kids. I'll be releasing episodes about a week early that are behind my membership. And I remember my friend CW Weeks on here. He was like, you and your new walled garden." And I was like, "What's actually interesting is that memberships allow me to make a gate because I couldn't if I had videos behind that were not ready to be released yet. There was no way anybody could access them." And come on, Aaron. I've got the link up there. It's starred. I don't know if it's highlighted or not. But but yeah, so um, I have those released. I've got some other stuff back there. I'm Me and my wife are slowly working towards doing an episode together, I think, and that will for sure start out behind the paywall. Um, the membership section. Uh, Not so much not because of the money, but because that's just where it's going to be for a while if we do one. And so that's coming up. If there's different levels, I've got the yours truly encourager, yours truly faithful, and yours truly believer. And at the believer level, I'm scheduling once a month, believer level only conversations. And so I do have a yours truly believer out there, and we're going to be having a conversation uh, probably next week. So I'm working set that up. I made a post over on YouTube about there's a little poll about things people would be interested in talking about. So that's kind of what I'm doing to try to with those conversations. Um, uh, it's not going to be a podcast. It may not be. It probably won't be live or out to public. It'll be a private conversation, and so I think Aaron says he's going to join. So I don't know. Do I need to put another invite out? Put another invite out here and see if he can pop on. But there's people out there watching. And what else? Yeah, so that's another item of interest is the. Oh, there we go. What we got here? Hello. Oh, gotta mute your YouTube going on. Is this Pseudo Boethius?
It is.
Boethius? Wow. Hey, I think I'm echoing on your side. Let me see if I can fix that for you. Um, well, edit mic settings. I didn't mean to mute you.
I had my external speakers working.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Hey, man.
I had my
Pseudo Boethius, nice to talk to you. Okay, yeah. Something's echoing. Hey, man. Pseudo Boethius, nice to. Yeah, you think you have your YouTube open still. If you'll mute your YouTube or exit your YouTube out.
I
And we
exited
got
YouTube.
Aaron.
Hey, what's up?
Okay, what's up, man? Dude,
Nothing much.
welcome. I don't
All
know if
right.
I've met you before, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got.
Been around here in the corner, I guess, a little bit.
Are you a cornered person? How long have you been a corner person?
I guess before it was called the corner.
So wild.
So maybe 2020, actually. I
Okay.
missed a little bit of your stream, to be honest, but towards the end, I think you talked about how your the first time during the election, it really got to you, and this time you're not caring as much. I feel like around 2020, that was the time I cared like the most about everything. But it was also the time I kind of waned a lot and stopped being as radical. And I think PVK was one of those guys that kind of reoriented me in a better place.
It's awesome.
So, because I really wasn't a big Jordan Peterson fan, but I still like some reactionary politics, but there were a few guys that were semi-adjacent to PVK, and I kind of came to like Christianity, or came back to it in a sense, like the world is kind of cringe, and all these issues are happening, and we have to. The only way to come back is to Christ, and so there's like a lot of, we talk about the Southern Baptist Convention, or I guess the PVK one about homosexuality, and so I came to the Gospels as like very critical, more of like the reactionary right kind of mentality. But then when you read the Gospels, Jesus isn't really like that. I mean, he's not a pushover. He brings the truth, or he brings a sword. But when you read like the Beatitudes, I read that and I was like, where was this growing up? I had no idea, Jesus' character. I knew I should worship him, but I didn't really know him. And I guess PVK was one of those guys that kind of was also a YouTuber that showed me a lot of Christian history and all that stuff. So it's been a wild ride.
This podcast format, me being on YouTube, is a direct result of both of those people.
Yeah.
Pseudo Boethius, we've seen each other. You were an early commenter and supporter of this Christian Baxter person. I think you even said, like, on that Paul's Randos, you were like, you would unsubscribe or something if he didn't interview me. Was that you?
No, that was not me.
Was that not you? Okay. Well, what's up, man? What made you pop up into the stream tonight?
I'll be quick. Now, only for you do I ever break any of my cardinal rules in dealing with the internet. So I don't. Only for you, CB. Nobody else. Just you. So feel special, my friend. You are a special person.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So
what's the rules? What are the rules?
The rules are as minimal. I like to do the commenting interaction. That's fine, but I don't like being on video or audio. So I went halfway. I said, oh, we'll do audio. Besides, you don't want to look at my ugly mug anyway, so forget about that. Yeah. But anyway, this is a fun topic in terms of the end of the world. Now, I'll just say this real quickly. I have been into end times eschatology my entire adult life. I mean, all the theories, all the ideas and everything. And one day I had this brilliant idea. What if I just took all that stuff and just threw it in a trash can and just let Jesus and the apostles and the Bible just speak for themselves and say, what do they want to say? And I came to a very shocking and surprising realization. The entire Bible from Genesis to Revelations is about end times. The very first end times event was Noah building an ark and God saying, I'm sick of you all. I'm just sick of you all. Noah, get in your ark, take the animals, and you all are going to get wiped out. Now, that's the kind of thing that the atheists love to point out, is how mean and awful and, vengeful God is. And they have a point. However, the thing is that we are part of an experiment to see just where, God obviously intentionally and deliberately hides himself, but he doesn't completely hide, but he mostly hides. I mean, we're not going to go look out into the night sky or daytime sky and see him as he is. We're not going to see him anywhere, probably for most of our lives. Unless you're a mystic and had the beatific vision, you're not going to see him. So what do we do about that? And the thing is, most of us are just going to ignore him and just do whatever we want. We might pay lip service to him, but we're not going to really pay attention to God. Let's be honest. And the entire Bible, from beginning to end, has these end times events over and over and over and over. And I'm not going to sit there and bore you to death and bring up every reference to it. But what's so shocking is just how few are always responding to him. Even Jesus himself says, enter by the narrow gate, because broad is the way to destruction. Now, of course, I'm paraphrasing there, but it ain't much. And so even Jesus himself is going, I know most of you ain't going to be listening to me. You're just not. You're just going to blow me off. You're going to, oh, what is this thing about, resurrection and incarnation? No rational person's ever going to believe that. And so it's like, and I mean, I hear that sort of talk every day on YouTube. Oh, yeah, somebody's going to incarnate. No, that's not going to happen. That's just irrational. And to a certain extent, they're right. It is irrational. It's like, well, yeah, it's irrational. That's the point, is it for it to be irrational. There are certain things where rationality just doesn't pay. It just cannot grasp the ultimate realities of life. So going back to the end times, it is, if you think about it, it's a metaphor for our lives, because each and every one of us, whether Jesus comes back or not, is going to come to an end. Every single one of us. We are going to have our own little end times event. Even if Jesus doesn't come for another 1,000 years, each one of us is going to have that day where it's going to be the last day on planet Earth. And the point for me of end times, no matter what take you have on it, is realizing that there is an end to the story. Before you even go off into the world, you realize there is going to be an ending to my story. There's going to be a day where there isn't going to be anything more for me to do, no one for me to talk to, no more conversations to be had. I am coming to an end. And after that, I'm going to a place that is completely alien to me. And so, knowing in advance I'm coming to an end, what do I want to do with this life that I have? And how do I want to live it here on this earth? And if you think about it, one of the great passages in all the New Testament is Matthew 25, where there's three parables. The famous one with the virgins and their lamps. And then there's the right after that, there's the parable of the talents. And then after that, there's the parable of the sheep and the goats. And the thing is, you have to realize all three of those parables are the exact same parable from three different perspectives. And what's the point of all three parables? You got a short time here. You need to figure out real fast what you want to do with this particular life and then do it. And don't be like wasting time on silly nonsense sort of stuff. I mean, the whole key to the parable of the wise and foolish virgins is the smart, wise virgins who had enough oil. What that's speaking about is they lived a righteous life. It's just that simple. I mean, we could, dissect all the symbolism, but they decided to live a righteous life. And so that lamp represents they were lights to the world when they were alive. They showed the love, the kindness, the forgiveness, the compassion that God requires, and the foolish ones did not. The talents, same thing. It's like God gives you gifts, use them. Even if it's only one stinking little gift that seems incredibly insignificant, use it anyway. Just do what you can with it. And it doesn't matter if you have, if you're like the greatest thing that's ever walked the earth or some insignificant little person, there is some gift you have somewhere that you can use to make a difference in this world. Maybe it's just for a few small people, but so what? And then you get to the sheep and the goats. And the shocking thing about that passage is Jesus doesn't care about how many times you went to church or how many worship sessions you led or how many times you read the Bible straight through or all your other religious sort of sugars. All he cares about, hey, how did you treat other people while you were here on this earth? Did you take care of those people that were hurting and having a hard time? Or did you just blow them off and just do your own thing? And again, it's all three just telling the same story. No matter how much time you have on here, it's going to go by real fast. I don't care if you live to be 90 or 100. It's going to seem like it was just 90 or 100 days and not years. And you have to make a decision real fast and real early in your life as to what you want to aim at and to what you want to do. And completely and totally ignore everything else. Politics, theology, none of that matters. If you can just figure out that one little tiny simple thing, you'll do all right. And then when you're there facing the Lord God himself, the maker of the universe, you don't have to be embarrassed. It's like, well, I did what you told me to do. You said go be a light, so I tried my best to be a light. And that's all he asks. Just that simple. That's all the salvation message you need. I mean, of course, we could go down for days and weeks and years on end about, you know, uh, salvation and what it means. But basically, it's just, hey, did you care about other people or did you just worry about yourself all the time? And so I just want to throw out that little piece of wisdom I had about end times and studying it for a lifetime. Now, is Jesus going to really come back? Yeah, probably. It's probably going to happen. When? I don't know. I, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to happen tomorrow, but that's just me. But for whatever reason, he tarries, he tarries. And so, and if,
He
and of
tarries.
course,
He tarries for all the 15-year-old boys that are dreaming of having sex one day.
you, there is some certain truth to that, my friend. There is some real truth to that. I mean, we're not embodied just so we can, you know,
Or 20-year-old
Yeah.
boys that are still waiting.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
man.
I
That's
mean,
what that was always the kicker for me. Every time somebody said that, I
yep.
couldn't help it. Be like, what?
I haven't lived my life yet. There's things I need to
Yeah,
experience down here. And there's truth to
yeah,
that. There is real
yeah.
truth to
So
that.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
And
That's
so
the
is it so mostly it's about what we do during this life in preparation of the end times more so than charting the end times?
well, when you look at Jesus, and there's that one very famous passage or that one very famous parable where he talks about the father going away and leaving the servants in charge.
Hmm.
And it's like, the whole point is that are you going to be doing what your master wants you to do while he's gone, or are you going to go goof off somewhere?
Yeah.
And the point is, yeah, you know, we better just go about and do what we know to do and not worry whether he's coming back tomorrow or not. We have things we have to do. And he leaves it very ambiguous intentionally. Now, I think when that time gets closer, though, I think we're all going to intuit that the time is close.
Hmm.
I think we're going to feel it in our bones. We won't be able to explain it. We won't be able to rationalize it, but we'll just know. You know, things just seem like they're headed towards a conclusion all of a sudden.
And that's
And
what Revelation means, right? The revealing.
exactly. The whole Bible is a revelation. I mean, the whole thing is. It's
Huh.
all God wanting to just get his message out and say, "Here, I'm here. I really am. I must be hidden. I might be hidden, but I'm here." And I'll give you a little evidence every once in a while that you're not alone. That this is not just a material existence, it's a spiritual one. Now, I believe 1000% that we are just spiritual beings having an embodied experience, that this is not our ultimate reality whatsoever, and that everything that we have done on this earth is going to go to it with us into the next life, good, bad, or indifferent. And I don't
Well,
understand the whole purpose behind it, but I know that's just how it is, that we are not, material, physical beings. We're spiritual beings having this temporary, material, physical, embodied experience for whatever reason.
I definitely think that this is Pseudo Boethius. This was taking there's a lot of steam built up underneath him not participating in streams, and we just let that
Well, it's your
all
fault,
that
CD.
energy.
You had to bring up the end of the world. Otherwise, I would just be sitting here
Yeah.
doing my balancing my checkbook.
Well,
Yes.
But
that's
you brought it up.
that's like I did bring it up. Yeah. Well, this there's a lot to it. I was gonna say this is one of the interesting things. Age, I don't know how to say your name, but the thief in the night bit. With to go back to the dispensationalism. This is one of the scriptures that gets pulled, just like with the rapture scripture. And what's so funny is that all of dispensationalism is trying to figure out like, like basically like X marks the spot. This is when it's going to happen. Yet this is one of those things, but we're never going to know exactly when. It's because it'll be a thief. So I find it kind of like a little bit contradictory in that regard. But yeah.
Well, let me ask you all this. I've had a kind of interesting kind of thought process as far as Revelations too, because it's I think it also is something that breaks maybe like a place in time was once one way, and there's a revelation, and now in a sense we can never go back, but we're still here in like time. I think if you follow the logic with me for a second, in 2020 a lot, I don't know if y'all did this, but before that in like 2018 or 19, like instead of enjoying my life, I consumed so much news content and rhetoric about like different aspects of like world change. And then, you had COVID, and then you had a lot of political unrest at the same time too. So you're stuck. And then you're, for me, I was like really interested in like fighting the left. I even went to like a BLM rally with a friend, and it was kind of more goofy, really. But in your head, you think like you're this like culture warrior, and all this like this story of just like if you like watch Fox, for example, like these people are coming for you, and you can participate by like fighting against them. And there was a little bit of that, but after all of that, for like half a year, I think people just kind of got tired, and then you just kind of move on. And so you had like a whole mindset of like, this thing is going to really happen and things are really going to change. And in ways we do, but then the real change is like, well, maybe, the opposite side had a point here and there. And I don't really know what I'm doing with my time. And maybe I should, I don't know. It's just something I really thought about. I don't know if y'all have ever thought about like decades
Yeah, I'll
changing
add to
where
that.
everyone was doing disco and now they're not. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, to Pseudo Boethius's point about kind of like what would happen if I quit focusing on the end times and just kind of live my life a little bit is a similar churn to what you're like to the political churn, because both of them are they're kind of underneath like something that's more transcendent, really. But they trick you into a sense of I think they both trick you into a sense of ultimacy, and that's part of the problem I'll go back to with dispensationalism, because it creates like an ultimate identity for your faith, like within Christianity, that's kind of higher than worship, is the knowledge of this, how this is going to happen. And so,
Right.
and the thing with, you're talking about like the culture wars is a similar thing. Yeah. And I had that very similar experience leading up to that time. And I happened to be a nurse working critical care during COVID too. And so it was just like, all those things happening at once were mentally, and it kind of was operating in a similar sense. It's like, well, I can figure this out. We can figure this out if we just get this expert here and then this expert here and this expert does this and this, and we're going to like, we can put the pieces together in a similar, like we can chart the end times. Like, you're really trying to control reality in a way that we can't. And that's, like you were saying, you kind of were saying that letting go of trying to control these people in that sense. Now, is there a place for the politic? Yeah, I mean, there's something to do with, the rulers of, we have laws and governances, but what happens when that placed in a place of primacy, then we're kind of disordered. So I think maybe some of us, I would put myself in this, are trying to work out, kind of like maybe have to some kind of pull away for like maybe even years to kind of come back to where, how can I put this back in a healthier place within my life? And I think so. That's kind of where I'm at on that. No, it's good.
Well, I think also, which was weird in that time, is that the participation is only maybe intellectual, spiritual maybe, but when you watch news, you don't really participate. You watch in the participation.
You consume.
And I think around 2020, that made people want to participate, but there really isn't a way to participate in something like that. That's why it makes sense, I guess, that Israel and Palestine are at war and Ukraine and Russia are at war, because I feel like the only thing people could do is just kind of fight. And a lot of people wanted to do that in America, but then they also didn't want to do that. So they're just kind of walking around and it was
check
weird
this out.
too.
This is what.
Go ahead. Sorry.
This is what that makes me think of. You said people want to do something. So what do? You put a certain flag in your profile. Mm-hmm. You put a black screen in your like you make a post on and then you have done something to participate in the bigger goings on. But like, we're trying to cram. So think about what it means to try to cram all your meaning of support into one or two posts with a digital little picture of a flag or a blacked out profile picture. Like, man, I've just participated as for one.
Yeah.
And that you're like doing all this consumption, but you're doing like no real production. And like you said, people are wanting to do something. And I think that that's because there's such a lack of participation in something like a deep and sacred religious practice. Like, we're trying to make those things hold, because it's like, it's like doing all this. It's like doing we do this even with like biblical studies or like with theology too. It's like consume, but like it outpaces our participation.
Yeah.
It can. And that's why the disembodied nature of that is probably just not healthy, no matter what the content is. And I mean, I find myself in that chart as well. So I think that that's where we're trying to make these things hold the sacred and religious and transcendent category in our ontology, and the politics can't, and that's why like so many people spun out when we thought, okay, we can make this enough. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on it.
Those are good thoughts.
Well, when it
Pseudo
comes to
Boethius.
human, we haven't even gone down the road of information theory and the critical importance of information. I'll tell you what, we think of appetites. It's like, oh, we get thirsty, we get hungry, we get bored, blah, 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 blah. But the one thing we thirst for as human beings more so than anything is information. We want to know why we're here. We want to know why these other people are here. We want to know, why the sky is blue and why it's this and that. And we want to know. We don't want to speculate. We want to know. And that is deeply built into us. So when we pay attention to politics, the news, and so on and so forth, all we're trying to do is figure out, what is my place in all of this?
Yeah.
And it's like, why is this all going on in my life, in my little corner of the world right now at this particular point in time? And I have no problems with that. I think there's a true healthy aspect to it. But it can, of course, always become all-consuming, because the truth is we can't really know the absolute truth about what's going on in this world, because we cannot trust those who are reporting on it or those who are telling us what's what. We really can't. Everyone has a bias, literally everyone. Everyone has an agenda to push. And I mean, and again, I'm not saying that to be cynical. I'm saying that's just reality. That's just real. You just have to come to know that people are going to push what we're going to want to push. And that's it. And it might be rational. It might be irrational. It might be evil. It might be good. It might be nobody cares. But you constantly are forced to evaluate every single iota of information, because you just don't know. Is this right? Is this wrong? Are they telling us the truth about what's going on over here? And it can be so all-consuming. And then there's a point where it's like, well, how much of this do I really need to know? How much of this is critical information for my salvation? And the shocking truth is very little of it. On the other hand, one thing you learn, because I am a culture warrior, there's just no doubt about it. I've been a culture warrior my whole life, but a very strange one, not a typical one, because I'm more of what you would call like an Alex Jones info warrior type.
Okay.
In other words, I'm looking for the meta narrative in all this. Looking at, there's floods here and there's rain there and there's war over here. It's like, what's the bigger story that's going on that all these little tiny stories are trying to point to? And you have to like remove yourself and look and see, what is the pattern that's being established here? Now, with politics and wars and whatnot, what happens is, because I've been at this so long, I'm able to find truly high quality sources of information. In other words, I don't have to worry if the news media is lying to me or pushing an agenda. I'll just find someone who really knows the subject matter, and I'll go listen to them. Like, for instance, there's a lot of military veterans on YouTube who have a lot of interesting information to give when it comes to wars and combat and things like that. And one thing I learned yesterday that I never knew about is that Russia has troops on the border of Israel right now, in Syria, in the Golan Heights. And it's like, what? There's Russian troops across the border from Israel in Syria on the Golan Heights? I mean, literally within visual distance of Israel, where the the Israeli observers can see the Russians clearly flying their flags, intentionally playing their national anthem. It's like the Russians want to be seen on this border. It's like nobody's been saying anything about this. They've also haven't been saying that the Ukraine is in Syria. And the Ukrainians and Russians are not just fighting in Ukraine, they're fighting in the Middle East. And it's like, what? And they're not fighting just in the Middle East, they're fighting in Africa too. I'm going, what? And it's like these veterans, you know, who have their contacts, who, you know, they have their networks from when they were in the military. They know what's going on. And it's like, oh my goodness, this isn't, you know, the little remote thing just between the Russians and the Ukrainians off in Ukraine. There's something far larger going on here and more sinister. Now, I just give that as one example. And it's like, well, how does this fit into the meta narrative here? What's going on? Is this kind of what the end times prophets were speaking about when the armies would gather against Israel in the last days and just want to ransack Israel and just drive it into the ground? Is that what's going on here? And of course, you know, it's just a rhetorical question. I have I have no opinion one way or the other, but it's like, you know, these ancient prophets are sounding awfully interesting right now at this particular point in time. And so,
Maybe
you have to kind of pay attention, but you also have to be disassociated with it too, because the truth is you don't know. But but it's so interesting. It's just so fascinating.
Well,
And there are real spiritual implications to it.
Yeah. If the only kind of criticism not to bring back the postmodernism or critical theory or anything like that, but
go ahead, bring it back, please.
Just maybe the only thing that kind of bothered me growing up about the end times, and maybe my church didn't talk about it that much often. We're more of like evangelical, more so than eschatological. But it just seems like a lot of times we just, sit on our hands when people discuss the end times, because it's another thing where, I mean, it's beautiful because people had a scare I think last maybe 2 months ago, where like the moons were aligning and like the way it was like coming across the Americas, it was like referencing.
Oh, you're talking about
that, like,
the
eclipse. And
the eclipse, yeah.
There is a nice woman in my work who's very eschatological, and she was really freaking out. But in my head, I was like, this could actually be kind of like a good thing. So I was semi-hopeful for it, and then it didn't happen. And so my boss kind of gave me a hard time. He was like, "Hey, the eclipse, right?" I forgot what he said. And he's like, he didn't come, huh? And then I said, no, he didn't. And I was like, I was actually like really disappointed, And I think just in my rant and maybe looking for the meta narrative, or probably just sincerity, is that I think the weird thing about our time now is that a lot of it is, I think we're tired of the uselessness or inactivity. I think that's why there are so many people who are radical, or Christians who want to be more evangelical, is just because for so long we just sit and watch TV. We don't do things, but we just
preach
don't
it there, Brother Aaron. Preach it.
Yeah. Because we don't have any experience. We don't know what to do besides, and I think that's probably why it resonates with us to just care for other people, because we literally can't think of anything else to do besides be Christ-like at this point.
Well, that would make sense. That would make sense about why so many young people wanted to do activism. Mm-hmm. You're saying you have all this energy, but it's and honestly, because again, like it turns it into spiritual, you know, a spiritual act or religious act. You know, it's like this
Yeah.
liturgy. Oh, here's the next thing that I can be activated by and participate in, and to try to ground myself into meaning
Yeah.
about a certain narrative. You know that seems important, seems maybe like the most important, and
Yeah.
But how old are you, Aaron?
I am 32.
Okay,
I don't look it,
so
but
No, you look like you're
yeah,
22.
man, I'm working on it. I don't
I,
know.
I once had that curse myself.
Yeah.
Maybe I still do. Yeah, that's
You know, it's also interesting too.
Do you feel?
I think. Or go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, just real quickly, I think it's also interesting that a lot of younger people are more irreverent, I think, to things. And in the past, it might have been more focused. You know, like if you're a left winger, you would specifically hate these things, and if you're a conservative, you would, you. But I think in my generation and the people a little bit younger, they're kind of finding idols in everything and just like toppling down everywhere. And I think
Yes,
they're
that's
just kind
so
of making
true.
fun of everything.
It's so true. It's called iconoclasm.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what it
it's coming
is.
back, and
It
it's
is.
like uh, even to like
Not,
areas you wouldn't think
nothing
about it.
sacred.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but then that
And
goes back to us looking for meaning because then we need the sacredness. But I apologize for
exactly. And it's like a negative sacredness. It's like you can't have these things be sacred to you. It's so nihilistic. It's like, well, we don't have anything to replace these idols with, so we're just going to knock them down and have nothing. Because at least with the iconoclasts, they're at least saying, okay, we don't need idols anymore because we have God, so we don't need 42,000 pictures of Jesus and
Mm,
Mary and statues and all that. We can do without that because we have God. We have the Bible. We don't need all these illustrations and art. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that was their attitude. But these iconoclasts, it's just destroy the idols and have nothing. There's not even like a transcendent reason to do it. It's
Yeah,
just pure destruction.
they just what did painted what is it, Stonehenge, and then another government, like it's all government buildings, which is interesting because those are the icons that we have
Well, in Chicago the
that
other
are
day,
that are well that are
mm.
let me tell you, have you ever heard of Buckingham Fountain in Chicago, in downtown Chicago? It's like the biggest, most beautiful fountain in the city. Well, they do have one in Grant Park. Big, beautiful fountain, huge tourist attraction. And what happened
Luke.
yesterday is
Hey, what's
they
up?
decided they had some iconoclasts go and fill the fountain with red dye. They just so instead of a nice clear water, it was basically made the fountain look like it was just spewing blood rather
Mm.
than water. It's like, well, what'd you do that for? And it's like, again, there's no point to it. It's just destruction for the sake of destruction. So in the Chicago area, it was big news that they had to shut down the whole sinking fountain and send maintenance crews out there to scrub all the
Oh,
red dye off of
I would
everything.
I would say it's not for the sake of anything. I would say that it's an attack on beauty and an attack on its
Bingo.
like it's really like
Absolutely.
an attack on a type of truth that beauty points to, and but what's interesting is like that it's these monuments that aren't religious because we have the separation of church and state, and so like and a lot of our religious monuments, the modern ones, aren't really beautiful, so it's not going to like say a lot if you like spray paint a strip mall.
It's
Well,
so
maybe
true.
they have the advantage and disadvantage of, since it's ugly, it's not going to be really remembered, but it's more of like a utility. So
What do
it's
you mean
like,
ugly?
well, I mean, some modern architecture is all right, but I think a lot of it seems more like it's the
Utilitarian.
opposite. It's
Yeah.
not like when you see like an old church, you can tell that they really thought this would last and this will be very important to them. But I feel like with like if you live in Austin, for example, there were like these really ugly apartments that were huge in the downtown area. And I remember one time there was like a huge leak in one of them too, and it was probably one of the pretty scary thing just to see like this bizarrely built building and like water coming from like the 12th floor. But it seems like if it can not be as decorative, it won't be iconoclast, if that makes any sense.
Exactly.
But that was already like an attack on beauty itself too. Like
Now,
in the
Aaron,
architecture.
are you in Austin, Texas right now?
I'm in Midland, Texas.
Okay. You're in a safe place then. Good.
Wait, isn't Midland where that's where Matthew Parlato's from?
Yeah, he's here. I need to find him on Discord and hang out with him.
Yeah, all the
Yeah,
good
dude.
people are from West Texas. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Those East Texans, oh well. But the
Luke, are
cool
you
people
in
aren't
here?
West Texas. But
Luke, are you in
anyway,
here?
one of the things
Yeah, hey, watch it. I've got family in Houston, so them's fighting words.
Houston's nice.
No, but I'm an Archie myself. But no, I'm doing chores around the house. And yeah, saw you guys were live. I'm currently watering the garden, so I'm not able to turn on video. But I thought I'd just hop in. I'm kind of just coming up to speed. I mean, I've been hearing you guys talk about the end of the world and ugly architecture and
Yeah.
all that. So I don't really have much context. But anyway, I thought I'd hop in.
Dude,
What's
well,
up?
it's good to hear from you at 11:38 in Central Time here with us. And
Oh yeah,
but it's yeah, man. It's I can hear the crickets in the background or whatever the birds.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's this thing on this attack or a spirit against. I think it's interesting because it's not really a thing. No one's going to do anything if you kind of tag, say, something that's not designed to be beautiful. But,
Mm.
like when you see graffiti in areas that aren't, designed to make you, then it's just, part of culture. But then that of like that culture. But then if you do attack like something that may be sacred, like everybody, think about it, everybody that goes and visits Chicago, did you say it's Buckingham Fountain?
yes, Buckingham
Like
Fountain.
everybody that's like, oh, you've got to go see Buckingham. Oh, you've got to go see Buckingham. It's like, yeah, we'll show you, what you want to come see. We're gonna piss all over it. So, I mean, it's because that's what that's gonna say. I mean, it's gonna get attention for one, but you also made a case about the lack of reverence, and I was thinking about how right at the time, a little over a decade ago, 15 years ago, when New Atheism just really like was having its
Yeah.
moment in the culture, was at the same time where like evangelicalism was peaking, and it was peaking with its lack of let's get rid of this. It was its own iconoclasm. They called it the seeker movement. Let's remove like anything overtly religious to keep this. If that's a barrier for you to come in and hear to get this knowledge, then let's get rid of this like sacred imagery of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at the peak. So like when New Atheism was saying that nothing matters not everything's meaningless. It was a perfect time to look around and be like, yeah, there's nothing really sacred around here. So yeah, this is all pretty, uh, you know, uh, vacuous meaning anyways, and it's just one less thing that they had to contend against um,
Yeah.
in propagating this realistic version of reality that they
Can I
put forward.
guys a question?
What's up?
And then I might
What's
hop
up?
on. But
All right.
do you think iconoclasm, if you wanted to steel man their arguments, I remember when people always said that, it's like they put their trust in something that they now realize may have issues. And I think a lot about atheists because they kind of, it seems like a lot of them are railing against something that they had a huge belief in and lost, you know. And then now they have this sense of obligation to destroy something that's sacred to us, but for them, it's actually bad. And I think you can do the same thing when Matt Dillahunty and I forgot his name, but he was an Orthodox guy. We're debating, and then the guy brought up like trans issues, and it's like, you know, atheism. The issue with that is you don't have anything grounding you. You can believe anything is true, and he kind of became irreverent to, you know, transgenderism, and that was something Matt's really passionate about. To where he got up and like walked away during the debate. So I guess iconoclasm sometimes is brought up as something that these jerks are doing to us, but a lot of times for me it seems more like people who lost something that was really important and are really upset, so they feel like they have to destroy the thing that was lying to them, maybe, or like the thing that was a barrier to a deeper truth they were looking for. And the only unfortunate thing is that the irreverence of like, hey, you know, Christ is really important to me, please don't make fun of him, is kind of lost on people, because I think even as a Protestant, that's probably why I don't support iconoclasm, is because you're destroying stuff that, you know, are important to people.
Oh,
What do you
absolutely.
guys think? I didn't end that in a question, so I'm sorry. I just kind of ran it again.
But you know what?
Could
Tom
I
Holland
could I jump in on this one?
Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, no, Aaron, when you were talking, it just made me feel like it really made me think about my own experience with my own deconstruction, and that was an iconoclasm of sorts, a tearing down of false images that needed to be torn down. Kind of a stripping down to build back up, and I think there's something in it. I mean, it can be destructive, but there can be like a creative destruction in it. And I think for me in my personal faith journey, that had a lot to do with like too much of an attachment to something like the historicism of the scriptures. Like I feel like this is very much related to what we've been talking about kind of in the metamodern conversation, where, you know, like modern criticism can really, I mean, disrupt people's faith. And I think for me, it was an encounter with that, like with Bart Ehrman and, you know, scholarship around the historical Jesus. And I mean, I've been able to come back to faith. I mean, via all the predictable figures like Jordan Peterson. C.S. Lewis was a big thing for me, like Bishop Barron and, of course, Jonathan Pageau. But I think, I mean, looking back on it, it's like I had invested too much weight in like something like the historical narrative being a certain way. And when I encountered information that was opposed to that, it in some ways, like those, you know, those icons had to be torn down. I had become too attached to those, you know what I mean? And like God, you know, of course, God is, you see God through the icons. He's beyond the icons. I had kind of like mistaken the icon for God, if that makes sense. So anyway, the icon had to go.
That's really interesting, Luke, to place the modern frame as an icon instead of seeing through it, but only seeing it. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I like the word idolatry more so than
Yes.
iconography because
that works.
because
Well,
iconography is just here's something that points to something else. And now Sam Tiedemann would make the point there is no difference between the two. It's basically the same conceptual underpinning, and he's got a point. I'll have to be honest, Sam's got a point there that it may have been a way to baptize paganism, if you will. All right, we'll have some images and some statues because you guys love your images and your statues. So here we go. We'll just baptize the statues and the images to keep you all happy. And it's like, if you think about it like that, like baptizing the Easter bunny, baptizing the Christmas tree, baptizing, having, the nativity thing. I mean, all of it is imagery, iconography, kind of somewhat a little bit idolatry. But the thing is this, you have to be wise in terms of what you do with that sort of stuff, because you don't want to destroy people and destroy culture in bringing them Jesus. And if they have these little totems they need to hang on to for whatever reason, if it's important for them to have an evergreen tree in their house during the Yuletide season, then fine. Okay, you can have your tree. We'll just make it a Christmas tree instead of a pagan tree, but you can have your tree. And, we can have Easter bunny, bringing the glad tidings of Jesus and stuff like that. And yeah, there's a lot of Christian holidays that have pagan roots. Oh, well, that's nice. But the thing is, and the wisdom in that is, we're going to take what you had in your culture that you thought was important, and we're going to bring it to a higher level of transcendence now. And we're going to point it at something new that you didn't have back when you were pagans. And that's why the Catholic Church was incredibly successful, is because it didn't sit there and argue about that sort of stuff. It just said, fine, okay, you can have your trees, you can have your bunnies, you can have your festivals, but now we're going to point them at Jesus, and we're not going to point them at Odin or Zeus or whoever. We're going to point them at a higher thing now. And I totally get it. When you read about Christian history, yeah, they had to make concessions at times. But if it was concessions to get them to go to a higher place, it's like, okay, we'll spot you this. You can take that little thing that you want. But remember what we're pointing at now. We're pointing at the Redeemer of the world. We're not just doing this to be goofy anymore. We're doing this with a purpose and an intent and a telos to bring you into heaven.
I think the way that. Oh, you go ahead, Luke.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, I think that's spot on. And the term icon was kind of, tongue in cheek. I do think, like, in this conversation, it's making me think that there's always the possibility of an icon becoming an idol, and that's almost inevitable. And there's no way to avoid that temptation. And it makes me think, you have Eastern iconography from, like, what, the Byzantium period. That's what we think of when it comes to icons. But what if it's just a signifier that points towards the transcendent? And it's always possible to get stuck on that signifier, to in some ways, like, mistake that for the thing itself, like in the Protestant world, because I grew up evangelical, like, it's the Bible can become an idol, the words on the page can become an idol, because it can get in the way of seeing through the words to the transcendent God. And it's just, to me, it's just like, it's an inevitable pattern that I'm starting to see. And it's like, sometimes those idols have to be stripped so we can see through them, but other times it's very helpful. Like, it's a signifier. It leads us, it points us towards God.
Yeah, I was gonna say something along those lines of talk about it like a natural pattern of why do little kids like action figures and why do we like like why do little girls like dolls and whatnot, like um they're looking to these things about like I'm going to be a mother one day. I want to be a warrior or an adventurer someday. Like and their imagination is taking them through those things to that place. And but even this, I kind of find within implicitly like when you flatten out everything. Well, okay, if everything can be made into an idol, then so let's get rid of everything, and then you have like, well, this isn't the world. This isn't like reality. If we there, you can't worship nature, so like, don't go outside. Like, you know, so then like we can't because we're going to become a pantheist if we look and we find these things beautiful and they don't point us to this or uh, I think things become corrupt and
Yeah.
uh, and that's where and we can look at something and be like, no, this has been corrupted, but it doesn't mean like that the reality of nature is corrupt or even that we like as a long time ago in the conversation Pseudobothia said something about we crave information. We also crave the purpose of creation, to be creative. And like, well, if you make anything as an image or like if you make a Christmas tree, like, no, you can't be creative because then you're creating an idol. Like all this stuff um, that allow it to be what it is and be in the right place in our life. Um, that's why I think that it is helpful to have like an ordered practice where in your life those things are transcended regularly.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to make an idol out of Christmas, every kid that's like, oh, I wish it was Christmas every day or my birthday every day. It's like, well, then it won't be special. And we have things and things we look at, things we enjoy that when you give them a holy day and you give them a time to focus and then a time to take the focus off. That's sometimes I think what is more healthy than no focus or all the focus, something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. A really cool way to just put it. And that reminds me of Ecclesiastes because, there are a time for these things. And I think maybe people just have like this, like, I think, I don't, I think that the Holy Spirit moves in our world. And when I was interested in deconstruction, I got into a lot of bad stuff. But one thing that brought me back was the concept of the Holy Spirit. And I think it's kind of like God moves in our world. And some things will have life to them. And that's maybe where, for example, printing the Bibles into a book, there's life to that now people can read for themselves. But then we have this mentality of this like logical conclusion of instead of trying to follow this spirit of what's necessary, which is impossible to do, fully. We just keep going on and on of like, well, then, we can only since we printed this, we only need this. We don't need anything else. And it's just like immediately our senses are like, there's no more life here, or this seems like a mistake somehow. Or I remember, I do love non-denom. I love Catholics, love all that stuff, but I do like the non-denom stuff. And we'd have like our Bible studies, and they were very beautiful. It was a time where I had like no friends, and I got invited to 2 different ones, so I became like going to church was like my nightlife, and it was a lot of fun.
The non-denominationalists will rule the world. There's no doubt about it.
But they wouldn't have a denomination to rule it with.
And that's why they're going to rule it.
But I remember us having the Bible studies, and we would read the Bible, and then we would just go off our own harebrained thoughts of like, what does this mean, and what does that mean? And I remember one guy was like, that's not what the Bible's saying. Just like stop like thinking random things. Just like focus. And I think a lot of times, just ending what my rant is again, that's like, there are points to why we do these things, but we have this mentality to, instead of being complete in the practice of worshiping God, we're more in like the perfection of, we're going to solve God by doing X no matter what, because that's what worked in the beginning. And I'm talking too much again, but I just think that's really fascinating. But what do you guys think?
Well, Pseudo-Boethius, if you want to answer that, I'm seeing cross-eyed, so we'll kind of let this be kind of our last thoughts here.
Sounds good.
All right. In terms of that, it's like we have to remember that God is definitely a person that we can relate to. And it's one of those things where you can go into a rationality mode about explaining the Trinity. But the only thing you need to understand about the Trinity is there's 3 people having a relationship throughout of eternity. And it's not just this one guy. It's these 3 people in relationship. And it's all about relationship, which relationships are not rational. unless you take it from a very materialistic perspective. I'm going to get in a relationship with that person so I can get what I want. But relationships are not rational in that you're having a relationship in order to give to the other person, which is very different from the modernist mindset. It's like, I'm going to go and talk to CB, and I'm going to talk to Aaron, not to see what I can wrangle out of their little noggins, but to give them something of myself so we can have relationship. So here we are. Luke's left. Now we have the Trinity here. We have 3 people in relationship. And that's all there is to it. It's nothing, if you sit there and start getting very rational about God and very modernist about him, you're always going to lose the story. You're going to lose it. It's always because you turn God into a geometric equation. And it's just like, well, what's the point here? Why am I doing this? What am I doing this church thing for? But that's what I love about the non-denoms, is that the core of every non-denominationalist church I've ever been to are the interpersonal relationships. They are exceptional at that. They're exceptional at building relationships between people. It's been like that from day one for me. Just like Aaron said, those silly little Bible studies are just as much about relationship as they are about the Bible. And so it's, with the Bible is the maybe the tie that binds and gives us the excuse to get together, but it's the getting together. It's almost as much as liturgy and going to church as going to the Orthodox high mass or whatever you will. It's really in those really simple things that we can have our most profound experiences, because we're experiencing relationship. Does that make any sense?
It's going to become the all-denom.
Oh, absolutely. Or some people like to call it the trans-denom. All it's going to.
No, that's
I would
smart
just
classing.
I would only contend to say that in the ideal that people look to in this idea of what it meant to be a village and then gather together to worship is that it's almost like those two things have been bifurcated with the different kind of high and low way of religious practice, and that there is magic, quote unquote, in the relationality, and that at the other end, though, having a place where the relationship with God is put like prime is like a place where you gather to where all people then are doing this worship with with the reverence that we seem to have lost, because it's hard to find reverence in a sense. It can be beautiful when people are like hanging out and enjoying fellowship, but it's hard to be like, where do we put that reverence, and where do we find that kind of like deep, transcendent and sacred connection? And I think that it's when those two things are actually operating together really well, that creates a type of ordered reality that is good. And I've just seen that pattern play out where people in the high church left the high church for the relationality of the low church, and people in the low church have left the relationality for the sacredness of the high church. And as opposed to them being to try to figure out how those two things work together better. So on that note, Aaron, is really cool. Glad you wanted to come in tonight. Pseudo Boethius, you've been a huge encourager on my workings of YouTube with your thoughtful commenting, and now getting to meet you voice to voice has been a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks for everyone in the comments for hanging out. Mills and Haggai, Luke for coming on. Even William Branch popped in for a second. Thank you, Fezzi, for taking part, and the 30 or so people that have been watching for most of this. Thank y'all for hanging out with us and making us feel a little bit virtually not alone. I popped up the logo up there. Forgot to put it up. But yeah, our virtually not alone bubble here in the corner. Yeah, this has been good. Thanks for making the end of the world feel less scary and more hopeful. And with that, guys, I'm gonna what am I gonna do? I'm gonna run this this little I'll do channel branding here. So
hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection is deeply meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed our conversation and believe that these conversations bring real value to your life and in this space, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. By doing so, you'll be helping me reach the goal of starting channel memberships, where we can continue building a TLC, this little corner of the internet sub-community. My hope is to be able to further cultivate digital community on this channel, to be a space where kindred